What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. We have a fun one today, going over my 5 favorite wide receiver sleepers. Everyone in this list has an ECR, so an average industry ranking of the wide receiver 60 or later, average ADP on Underdog, wide receiver 55 or later. So these are not wide receivers we are taking in the middle rounds, but they are elite options for us in the later rounds. So who do I like? Start things off with Rashid Shaheed, average industry ranking of the wide receiver 60, ADP 55. Everyone on this list gets a little bit later. As you can tell, this was the earliest one. My wide receiver 52. So Shaheed really came out of nowhere in the second half of his rookie season, scoring. Remember those 2 really long touchdowns? He had like the really long reception, really long carry. I don't remember if those were his first 2 touches. I think they may have been at least 2 of his first 3 touches, but he really just comes out of nowhere, right? Slowly earns a little bit more trust from the coaching staff in that rookie season. Sees a snap share rise from, it was like the mid-teens in the first couple games, goes up to like 70, 73%, 83% in week 18, again, gaining more and more trust. Then last season, he really maintained that high snap share. Wasn't at, 90% every game, but he was at a very, very strong snap share. Had a better season, I think a lot of people know. 719 yards, 6 total touchdowns at 719 receiving yards, had more rushing yards on top of that, finishes as a wide receiver 43. Now, there's a few reasons that I like him a lot this season. One, he's just a straight up value given his production from last season. 2, the Saints hired Clint Kubiak from the 49ers as their offensive coordinator this season. Given the things that we know about him, what we have heard so far in camp from beat reporters, we know that they're going to focus more on using pre-snap motion. They're going to do a better job of scheming players open than Pete Carmichael did. So I think this is all fantastic news for Rashid Shaheed. And then third, the Saints didn't go after anyone. So even if you don't believe in the coaching change, even if you personally are like, I don't know, not sold on Shaheed as their number 2, well, the Saints are, right? They did not go after wide receivers in the draft, in free agency. So he still really only has A.T. Perry backing him up, who's a completely different wide receiver than Shaheed is. Shaheed is a deep threat. He is their fastest wide receiver, obviously, a true playmaker. A.T. Perry is someone who can play the X role, play on the outside, maybe be used in the red zone, but is not someone who's beating anyone downfield, not someone who we think is going to consistently separate, consistently get open, and be like a high-end fantasy producer. He'll probably be a decent third wide receiver in 3 wide receiver sets, but Shaheed is going to be their second best wide receiver this season. And I think that's people's kind of hesitation and why he's going this late is because he did come out of nowhere, right? He wasn't someone we were talking about at all to begin his rookie season, comes out of nowhere, and then it's like, okay, can he do it again? Does it again, right? Has a really strong second season, but everyone's like, I don't know. But again, they only used the 5th round pick on Bub Means, does not project as a very good prospect, didn't go after anyone in free agency. It just speaks to how highly the Saints view Shaheed, and if he's going to be their wide receiver 2 this season, I'm very confident he's going to end up as a top 50 wide receiver in fantasy. So I want to remain ahead of ADP, and where he is right now, we can continue doing that. If he becomes a top 40 wide receiver and you have to rank him in the 30s, then we're going to have to hesitate in being ahead of ADP, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to kind of hover around where he is, maybe go up 5 to 10 picks, overall, not 10 wide receiver picks. But yeah, I think he's someone we really want to be ahead of ADP on to have on our teams. Great player, great opportunity this season. Another wide receiver I want to stay ahead of ADP on is Dontayvion Wicks, wide receiver 68 by ECR, 61 by ADP, my wide receiver 58. Wicks was also another name that really came out of nowhere in his rookie season, which was last year. So Shaheed was 2 years ago, rookie season. Last year, Wicks was a rookie. And it was especially out of nowhere because, remember how young the wide receiver core was, right? We had Christian Watson in year 2. You had Romeo Doubs being super young. You had Jaden Reed being a rookie. Their entire team, entire wide receiver core was young, and that's not usually the one where you see all of a sudden another young breakout. It's just they hit on a ton of their young wide receivers. Just basically great drafting on the part of the Packers there. But he was really, really good on limited snaps. Like, it's not like he lit up the box score or anything. It's like he had 1,000 yards, but he was extremely efficient with his targets, 67% catch rate, nearly 15 yards per reception, a really strong combo. Like 67% is really strong. When you add on 14.9 yards per reception, that is really, really good. The big thing there, though, is it wasn't like he was slot only or flanker only, or, he was only playing the X. Like, he could play every position, which from a rookie is fantastic to see. Like, typically it takes rookies a little bit more time, especially at wide receiver, to, fully know the playbook, fully know all of the positions, to learn all positions, and some just can never learn all positions. But to be thrown into that in year one because of the injuries, right? You had all of Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, all of them at times were injured and missed time. And so it forced Wicks to kind of play different roles throughout the year. And he excelled in all of them. He got better as the season went along. And what I'm saying is, at worst, so at absolute worst, that makes him a great handcuff for 3 different wide receivers. You have 3 different players that could get injured or just not be that great. And let's be honest, they all got injured at times last season, where he can fill in for any one of them. But honestly, I think he's good enough to be out there in 3 wide receiver sets, even when everyone is healthy. And I think he can be their starting X receiver this season. 69th percentile success rate versus press, 71st percentile success rate versus man. Again, whenever I talk about those, Matt Harmon, Reception Perception, great website, check it out. He posted above average success in all areas of the field. So it's like, this is why I like him so much, right? There are some players who are only good deep, only good intermediate, short, only good from the slot, on the outside. He can do it all. He can win at all levels of the field, inside, outside. It doesn't matter. So wherever they want to put him, wherever there is a role they need to fill, he can do it. He's just a good football player. It is as simple as that. And given how good I think the Packers offense will be, if he can earn, like a 70% snap share, he's going to shatter his ADP as the wide receiver 61. And as you know, that's what we're looking for. We're not always looking for just straight up values where it's like, ooh, I think he can finish 58th. Have him ranked 58th right now. We just want to remain a little bit ahead of ADP. I don't think it's like, oh, he's probably going to finish 58th. That beats 61. I think he has the upside to blow past that ADP, to finish as like the wide receiver 30, which is way more beneficial than just drafting someone who can slightly outproduce. I think he can be awesome this season on an awesome team, makes him a great player to target late. Another late round pick I like is Zay Jones, ECR wide receiver 90, ADP 81, my rankings 76. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. is obviously the Cardinals' top target, then is Trey McBride behind him. Like, I think that is absolutely locked in there, unless there's an injury, obviously, but that's locked in, assuming health. But I think that Zay Jones is going to be that third target. Jonathan Gannon, their head coach, he talked very positively about Zay in his press conference. He was saying, he can play all 3 positions. He said how smart he was like 6 times. Like, he clearly values him very highly. And I think Michael Wilson was like fine as a rookie, but he didn't really command any sort of target share. Like, for as many routes as he ran and as little competition as there was, remember, Marvin Harrison wasn't out there last season. Like, wasn't that good. He was out there basically every play. He was only competing with Rondale Moore as the wide receiver 2. Like, we know for a fact, Rondale Moore is never going to command a target share. So, like, not very difficult to command targets over Rondale Moore. It's like the competition wasn't there, and he was still like, he was fine. Like, he had a fine season, but I don't think he's as good as Zay Jones. Zay Jones commanded 121 targets 2 years ago. He had some injuries last season, but his 17-game pace was also 121 targets. I don't think there's a world where Michael Wilson is going to command that many targets. Also, I'm starting to really warm up to Kyler recently. Like, he's obviously, I don't want to say injury prone, but given history, like he struggles staying healthy, right? He's battled through injuries throughout his career. So that is always going to be a concern with Kyler. But he's been really good when healthy. He's now more removed from that ACL injury, ACL tear, obviously. If he can avoid these injuries, right? He's had the ACL, but he's had ankle injuries, shoulder injuries. And it's like, when you look at his splits when healthy, he's really, really good. I mean, better for fantasy than real life, but he's still a really good quarterback in real life. And like, I think this team can be a great offense. He's just got to stay healthy. And if I think they're going to be a great offense, and Zay, I think, should easily win the wide receiver 2 job, ranking him as the wide receiver 90 is a complete joke. Like, we're going to get to, some really late wide receivers in a second, where it's like, they're being ranked as like a wide receiver 5, and that doesn't even make sense because they're wide receiver 3s on potentially good teams. But this one's ridiculous, because if he's the 2 on above average offense, why is he going as the wide receiver 90? That just feels like a joke to me. Again, I know that Trey McBride is there, and you can talk about him as the 3rd target, but you can do that with a lot of teams. Wide receiver 90 is a little bit ridiculous. I know for a fact his ADP will be going up. He will not be this inexpensive all summer. So now is the time to draft him before it gets too high. And if you want to take advantage now, make sure you're doing Underdog drafts. It's by far the best platform to draft on. And by signing up with my promo code, you're not only going to get my redraft rankings for free, but they'll also add bonus cash in your account up to $250, just depending on how much you deposit, which is enough to, if you took full advantage of that, you could join 83 Pomeranian drafts or 50 puppies. Like, you can literally join Underdog leagues for less than half the cost of a lunch nowadays. I just think that's a no-brainer, especially when there's so many ADP values right now. There's a lot of players we are talking about that are not going to be this expensive when you are drafting in late August, but they are right now. And so you can take advantage by doing some drafts right now. Again, if you want to get in on the action, promo code FFA, deposit at least $10. You'll get my redraft rankings and Underdog for free, along with any promotion they have in there. And again, it's the deposit cash bonus. So 50% of your deposit will go towards a bonus up to $250. Okay, so those are some regular sleepers. How about we dive into the deep sleepers? Okay, these players are going late. These players are not locks to produce. Okay, when you have a player who's ranked outside the top 120 wide receivers, they are not a lock to produce this season. But I think the ADPs and I think the rankings, specifically ECR, are just jokes on these two. So we'll start off Jalen Tolbert. Tolbert is the wide receiver 121 by ECR, 85 on Underdog, wide receiver 80 in my rankings, but I can just stay ahead of ADP on him. You got Lamb, you got Cooks. Those are the top 2 wide receivers on the Cowboys. I don't really think that's going to change unless there's an injury. But with Gallup leaving, the wide receiver 3 job is up for grabs. It is open for Jalen Tolbert to take. I think he is in line to win that job. There was some hype around him last summer before he ultimately kind of split the role with Gallup, playing ahead of Gallup at times last season, but overall kind of playing around 40% of snaps most weeks. The reports so far this summer is that he seems to have taken another step from last season. He's been training a lot with Dak, a lot with Brandon Cooks, learning a lot from Brandon Cooks, and it seems like he has his confidence back. That was something he just completely lost in his rookie season. Like, he came in and was like, I'm going to dominate in the NFL, and then he had the injuries. He just didn't produce, didn't get the snaps, and that just kind of like shattered his confidence. He's been building that up over these last 2 seasons. And I just think the big thing here is opportunity. Like, Gallup is leaving behind 57 targets, but Pollard is leaving behind 67 as well. And I don't think all those 67 are going to Dowdle and Zeke. I think some of that is going to shift to the wide receivers. Also, while I don't think this is the season that Brandon Cooks falls off, it's certainly possible. It's his age 31 season. We have seen plenty of times where wide receivers fall off after age 30. And while I've talked about the wide receiver cliff not being 31, not really being 32, being like 33 is like the real cliff. So I don't think, again, this is the year Cooks falls off. It's still possible that it is. So we've got, a former third-round pick that the coaching staff really, really likes. They have faith in him on a team that is super pass-heavy, has the 10th most vacated targets in the league, with only Ryan Flournoy backing him up for the wide receiver 3 role that he's going to beat out. And you only have a 31-year-old wide receiver ahead of you as that number 2, currently being ranked as the 121st wide receiver. I'm very confident that we should be ranking him ahead of that, and I love taking him in the final round of Underdog right now, because think about it, like most teams wide receiver 1 come off the board in the top 30, right? There's 32 teams, wide receiver 1 in general is going to be top 30. Maybe we can push that into like the top 40 for some bad teams, maybe like the mid 40s for some really bad teams or teams where we don't know who the wide receiver 1 is. Then you go to the wide receiver 2s on good teams, right? Those are in like the, honestly, 20s to 40s really, but most are gone by that top 50 with, a few really bad teams beyond that. At an ECR of 121, we should only be finding mediocre teams wide receiver 4s, not wide receiver 3s on Dallas, who led the league in points per game by a wide margin last season, who led the league in pass attempts per game last season, which is probably not going to change. At worst, they'll be top 3. If you want a wide receiver on any team, a wide receiver 3 on any team, it's Dallas, right? Like, sure, Gallup kind of stunk last season, but that's because Gallup kind of seems like he's dust at this point. But we've seen stretches where this offense can support a wide receiver 3. Maybe not for the full season at times, but think back to Noah Brown in 2022. He had some great games. Cedric Wilson had some great games in 2021. Gallup had 100 targets as their wide receiver 3 in 2020. So there is opportunity there. If Tolbert can command a target share, which I think he can, there is opportunity without even considering the possibility of an injury or a decline in play from Brandon Cooks. So again, elite pick in round 18 on Underdog. If you look even deeper, super deep sleeper at this point, Xavier Gipson, wide receiver 142 by ECR, 136 by ADP, meaning nobody is taking him in the final round of Underdog. My wide receiver, 96. Now, for those of you who only play in 8, 10, 12 team redraft leagues, you probably don't need to worry about Xavier Gipson. You're not going to make it to my wide receiver 96 in your draft. But I know many of you play in deeper leagues, 14, 16. I've heard some of you playing 18 team leagues, deeper benches. Many of you play in Dynasty. He should be there in Dynasty. He should be someone you're stashing in Dynasty. Or on Underdog. He is definitely a name that we should be keeping in mind. Not only for drafting him, but also keep his name in mind when thinking about drafting Mike Williams or Malachi Corley. I think the public believes that this wide receiver room is open, that, they have zero talent, and so anyone they add is going to have a solid target share. They sign Mike Williams, he's going to get a ton of targets. They draft Malachi Corley, well, he's obviously going to command a target share. But that's not really true. The Jets love Xavier Gipson. Like I said, the Dallas Cowboys really like Jalen Tolbert. The coaching staff likes him. The Jets coaching staff loves Xavier Gipson as an undrafted rookie free agent last season. He beat out Hardman, who they went after in free agency. Hardman ended up just not being involved at all because Gipson beat him out. And while he wasn't efficient by any means, that makes sense when you're catching passes from Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, and Tim Boyle, right? Like he's going to be more efficient catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. This is really the takeaway I want us to have. Just don't count Gipson out. Don't think that because he's an undrafted free agent last season that he's all of a sudden definitely going to get out targeted by Mike Williams and Malachi Corley. You don't need to go out and draft a bunch of him right now, although I'm making it a point to draft some of him in round 18 Underdog because no one is, and there is a really big edge in just having a different team. Like if he's only going to be 1% rostered, he absolutely has upside on this offense, especially in those final weeks. But overall, just please don't assume that Mike Williams, who's 30 years old, coming off a torn ACL, or Malachi Corley, who profiles as simply a gadget player, not someone who's going to command targets, are locks to outproduce him. They're the favorites for sure, right? If you were just straight up picking who's more likely to be productive, it's them. They're more likely to. But again, they love Gipson. I saw some reports that, they view Gipson as a clear starter and that they wanted to add more depth in the draft because Mike Williams wasn't a lock to be healthy to start the season, and they don't like Lazard at all, and they do need some depth at wide receiver because it was pretty trash last season. Sometimes these are the picks you gotta make late on Underdog if you want to differentiate yourself and have a chance at that ceiling. But even if you don't play best ball and you don't play on Underdog, just remember his name when you're looking to draft Mike Williams or Corley in the mid to late rounds. When you're about to click that button on Mike Williams, remember they do have other options, that he is coming off a torn ACL. He is 30 years old. And when you're looking to click Corley, remember that he is a gadget player. I know they like him as well, but he's a gadget player. He's not going to command targets, and they really like Xavier Gipson. So if you watched this far, be sure to hit the like button, and why not subscribe while you're down there. I'll be back tomorrow to go over some running backs I have ranked a lot above or below ECR, and then Monday for, of course, another episode of Mock Draft Monday. That, my friends, is the end of this one, and thanks for watching.